the village of Iil Kururu sat nestled between rolling hills and the winding path of the Ogen River, its people bound by tradition, myths, and the whispers of unseen spirits. The elders often told tales of Zara, the river goddess, a being of unmatched beauty who ruled the waters with both love and wrath. She was said to be waiting for the man destined to unite with her, a mortal whose strength and spirit could match her divine energy. For centuries, no one had been chosen until now. Idris was unlike any other man in the village. Tall and broad-shouldered, his skin glistened like polished ebony under the sun. His presence commanded attention, not just for his striking features, but for what the village women whispered about him, the undeniable gift he carried between his thighs. It was not just a symbol of his masculinity, but a sign of his fate, an omen foretold in the ancient scrolls kept hidden in the shrine of the elders. But Idris had never believed in such stories. He was a warrior, a hunter, and the pride of Iil Kururu. Women adored him, and men respected him, yet he carried a secret torment. No matter how many maidens he bedded, no matter how many nights he spent in the arms of the most beautiful women in the village, he remained unsatisfied. A hunger gnawed at his soul, a craving he could not name. One night, after another failed attempt to find release with a willing maiden, he stood by the river, staring at his reflection in the moonlit water. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, the sound of frogs and crickets filling the silence. The river seemed to call to him, whispering his name like a lover waiting in the dark. Fireflies danced along the riverbank, their soft glow adding to the ethereal allure of the moment. "Idris," the voice murmured. He stiffened, his heartbeat quickening. He turned sharply, scanning the trees and bushes for the source of the voice, but he saw no one, just the water, still and glistening under the moonlight. "Idris, you cannot resist me forever." The voice was soft yet commanding, sultry yet ancient. His skin prickled with goosebumps. This was no ordinary call. It was her, the goddess. He staggered back from the riverbank, his chest rising and falling as confusion battled with desire. The elders had warned him of this, but he had laughed off their stories as the ramblings of old men. Now, standing before the sacred river, he felt the truth settle deep in his bones. He was chosen. The next morning, Idris approached the council of elders, seeking answers. They sat in a semicircle under the great baobab tree, their faces weathered with wisdom, their eyes holding secrets passed down through generations. The soft hum of bees collecting nectar from nearby blossoms filled the air, adding an unusual tranquility to the tense moment. "You have felt her call," the chief priest, Baba Dyke, said without preamble. His deep-set eyes bored into Idris's soul. Idris nodded, his voice unusually hesitant. "I did. But how do I know it is truly her?" The elders exchanged knowing glances before Baba Dyke spoke again. "No ordinary man can hear her whispers. Only the one destined for her can feel her pull." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You are the one, Idris. You were born for this." The words sent a shiver down his spine. "But why me?" he asked, his voice laced with both curiosity and fear. Baba Dyke rose, his white robes billowing as the wind picked up. He motioned for Idris to follow him into the sacred shrine, a dimly lit chamber filled with the scent of burning incense and the presence of the ancestors. The walls were adorned with carvings of past warriors, their stories etched into history. The flickering light of oil lamps cast shifting shadows, making the ancient figures seem to move. The priest stopped before an ancient mural, its colors faded with time, but its message clear. It depicted a powerful man standing before a goddess, their bodies entwined in an embrace that defied the laws of nature. "This is you," Baba Dyke said, pointing at the figure of the man. "You are the reincarnation of Obi, the great warrior who once attempted to unite with the river goddess but failed. His spirit has returned in you, and now you must succeed where he did not." Idris's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the mural, his mind racing. The weight of destiny settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Outside, the distant sound of children laughing and women pounding yams reminded him that life continued, unaware of the burden now placed upon him. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked, though deep down he already knew the answer. Baba Dyke turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Then you will suffer an endless hunger that no mortal woman can satisfy. Your body will yearn for something it can never find, and you will never know peace." Idris clenched his fists. He had already begun to feel that torment. Every encounter with the village maidens left him empty, his desires unfulfilled. He could not live like this. "What must I do?" he asked finally, accepting his fate. The elder's lips curled into a solemn smile. "You must go to her. When the full moon rises again, you will enter the river and surrender yourself to Zara. But be warned, she will not accept you easily. You must prove your worth. Show her that you are strong enough to handle her power." Idris swallowed hard. "And if I fail?" Baba Dyke's eyes darkened. "Then you will not return." A chill ran down his spine, but he squared his shoulders. He had faced wild beasts in the forest, fought off raiders, and survived countless battles. He would not be defeated by fear. That night, as he lay on his mat, staring at the thatched roof of his hut, he thought of the goddess. Would she be as beautiful as the stories claimed? Would she be gentle or wild like the raging river? His body stirred at the thought, his mind drifting to the unknown pleasure that awaited him beneath the waves. One way or another, he would find out. The night of the full moon arrived, casting its silver glow over the village of Iil Kururu. A hush fell over the land, as even the wind seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Tonight, Idris would fulfill his destiny or be lost forever. Dressed in a simple white cloth wrapped around his waist, he walked barefoot toward the riverbank, his powerful frame illuminated by the soft moonlight. The villagers, aware of his divine calling, remained in their homes, whispering prayers and fearful wishes for his safe return. Only Baba Dyke watched from the shadows, his aged eyes knowing that no man who entered the arms of a goddess ever returned the same. The water shimmered like liquid silver, eerily still as if awaiting his arrival. Idris took a deep breath, the night air thick with the scent of wet earth and ancient magic. Then, without hesitation, he stepped into the water. The moment his feet touched the river, a shiver of energy coursed through his body. The coolness of the water was not of this world. It carried an embrace, a silent whisper, a longing that tugged at his very soul. He waded deeper, the water climbing up his strong legs, past his waist. An owl hooted in the distance, its cry sharp and foreboding. And then darkness. A sudden pull yanked him under. Idris gasped as the river swallowed him whole, dragging him into an endless abyss. The world above disappeared, and in its place, he found himself submerged in a vast underwater palace. Giant coral pillars stretched toward the unseen sky. Bioluminescent fish swam lazily around him, and the water itself carried a glow that bathed everything in a mystical blue hue. And there, at the center of it all, she stood, Zara. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, with skin as radiant as polished bronze and eyes that held the secrets of the universe. Her long, flowing hair floated like waves around her, and her curves were draped in a shimmering fabric that seemed woven from the stars themselves. The faint scent of jasmine and sea breeze surrounded her, intoxicating and divine. She watched him with an expression that was both curiosity and hunger. "You have come to me, mortal," she spoke, her voice echoing like a song carried by the tides. Idris, despite his usual confidence, felt the weight of her presence press against his chest. He had been with many women, but none had looked at him the way she did, as if he were the key to something she had long sought. "I was called," he said, his voice steady but filled with reverence. She smiled, slow and knowing. "Yes, because you are the only one worthy." With a flick of her wrist, the water around them pulsed with energy. Idris felt his body grow light, floating toward her as if the river itself was surrendering him to her embrace. When their bodies finally touched, it was like fire meeting water, opposites colliding in a frenzy of passion. Her hands explored him, mapping every inch of his hardened muscles. His fingers traced the curves of her divine form, feeling the sheer power beneath her smooth skin. The faint scent of jasmine and sea breeze clung to her, heightening the intoxication of the moment. When she took him in, the river trembled, sending waves rippling through the land above. Idris had never known pleasure like this, a sensation that went beyond the physical and seeped into his very soul. Time ceased to exist. They moved together, their bodies locked in an eternal rhythm, their cries mingling with the currents. The water shimmered around them, bioluminescent organisms lighting up with every movement, casting an otherworldly glow upon their entwined forms. She was insatiable, her hunger endless, yet he met her with equal fervor, matching her need stroke for stroke. It was a battle of dominance, a war waged through passion, and when they finally reached the peak of their union, the river itself seemed to explode in waves that stretched across the land, disturbing flocks of sleeping birds along the riverbank. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Idris collapsed onto the soft bed of the river palace, the silky moss cushioning his fall. Zara lay beside him, her breath uneven, her eyes clouded with satisfaction. "You are unlike any man I have ever taken," she murmured, running her fingers down his chest, tracing the faint scars of past battles. Idris smirked, his confidence returning. "Perhaps because I am no ordinary man," she chuckled, though there was something possessive in her gaze. "You belong to me now, Idris." But he shook his head. "I have answered your call, but I must return to my village. My people need me." A flicker of jealousy crossed her face, her jaw tightening. "Return to what?" "Mortal women who will never satisfy you as I have." Idris stood, rolling his shoulders. "Perhaps, but my life is on land, not beneath the waves." Zara's lips curled into an unreadable smile. She rose from the bed, her ethereal form glowing in the dim light of the palace chamber. The coral walls behind her shimmered with every movement, as if the palace itself responded to her emotions. Then go, my warrior. But know this, I am always watching. With a wave of her hand, the water swirled around him, cool and forceful, and before he could blink, he found himself gasping for air at the river bank. The village still slept, unaware of the storm that had just passed beneath their feet. A lone owl hooted from a nearby tree, its golden eyes fixed on Idris as if acknowledging his return. Idris returned home, but he was not the same man who had entered the river. He was different, stronger, more powerful, and his hunger had only grown. Word spread quickly that Idris had returned, his presence more magnetic than ever. Women who had once enjoyed his company now found themselves drawn to him in ways they couldn't explain. His touch ignited flames in them that no other man could quench, and soon his nights became filled with the moans of countless maidens, all vying to claim a piece of him. Zara watched from her underwater palace, her heart darkening with every moment he spent away from her. She had thought she would be enough for him. Hadn't she given him the pleasure of the gods? Hadn't she claimed him as her own? Yet here he was, laying with village women as if they could ever compare to her. The jealousy twisted inside her, a growing storm of rage and longing. She would not allow this. No, if Idris thought he could have both the goddess and the women of his village, then he was mistaken. She would remind him who truly owned him. And so Zara devised a plan, one that would bring him back to her arms whether he wished it or not. The moon hung low over the Ogen River, its glow shimmering like liquid silver upon the rippling water. Beneath its surface, deep within the sacred palace of Zara, a storm of desire and envy raged in the heart of the river goddess. She could not bear it any longer. Idris belonged to her. He had proven his worth, rocked her world in ways no mortal or even immortal ever had. But instead of staying by her side, he had returned to his village, wasting his strength on common maidens. The very thought made her blood boil. But Zara was not just a goddess of love and desire. She was also a goddess of wisdom and cunning. She would not demand his loyalty. She would bind him to her in a way no other woman, mortal or otherwise, could. Idris would become her prince. To do so, she would gift him the power of the deep, a force so great that no woman would be able to resist him, not even those he played with on land. He would rule by her side beneath the waters, never to return to his village permanently. But there was one problem. The other river spirits had seen her pleasure. The mermaids, mystical beings who ruled the lesser streams and creeks, had witnessed her night of passion with Idris, and their envy burned hot. You dare to claim him for yourself. One of them had hissed the morning after Zara had sent Idris back. Her emerald scales shimmered with agitation. We saw what he did to you. No man, mortal or god, has ever touched you like that. And now you expect us to let you keep him alone? Another had laughed, her voice like the tinkling of enchanted bells. If you wish to make him your prince, you must share him, one night with each of us, or we will not bless his ascension. Zara clenched her fists, her pride wounded, but she knew she had no choice. These mermaids held power in the depths, and without their blessing, Idris would remain just a mortal, a man who could walk away from her. She could not let that happen. And so she agreed. Idris had just finished laying with one of the village maidens when the river called to him once more. The wind carried Zara's voice, sweet and seductive. "My love, come to me." His body shivered at the familiar pull, the need he had tried to suppress rising once again. No matter how many women he took, none compared to her. She had ruined him. With a deep breath, he rose and made his way back to the river. This time, when he stepped into the water, he did not feel fear, only desire. The river parted, welcoming him back into its depths. The currents cradled his body, pulling him down into Zara's world. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a grand chamber made of shimmering pearls and coral, the waters around him glowing softly. Zara stood before him, more beautiful than he remembered, her body wrapped in cloth spun from the sea itself. But she was not alone. 9 other women surrounded her. Their beauty was unnatural, each of them a vision of perfection. Their hair flowed like seaweed in the water. Their eyes glowed like hidden treasures beneath the deep. They watched him hungrily, their lips curved in knowing smiles. Zara approached him first, cupping his face with her delicate hands. "My love," she whispered, "I wish to make you my prince, to give you power beyond imagination. But to do so, you must complete the ritual." Idris raised an eyebrow. "And what is this ritual?" The 9 mermaids stepped closer, their soft laughter sending ripples through the water. One of them, her skin shimmering like moonlight, ran a delicate finger down his chest. "You must share your strength with each of us," she purred. "One night for each of us." Idris's breath hitched as realization dawned on him. He looked to Zara, expecting to see jealousy in her eyes, but she only nodded. "This is the way, my love. Each of them will give you their power, but in return you must give them pleasure, unlike any they have known." A slow smirk formed on Idris's lips. "A challenge. I accept." Each night, a different mermaid came to him, taking on Zara's form, ensuring that he could not tell them apart. It was a game they played, a test of his endurance, his strength, and his control. The first night, he was met with the mermaid of the southern stream, a fiery creature with skin as golden as the sun. She was wild, demanding, testing his patience as she rode him with the energy of the rushing river. When he finally made her scream his name, she gasped, her power flowing into him like an electric current. The second night, the mermaid of the hidden lagoon took her turn, slow and sensual, dragging out every second, her moans like a melody that echoed through the deep. Her power seeped into him, making his body stronger, his senses sharper. Each night, a new mermaid came, each with her own desires, her own ways of teasing and tempting him. Some were fierce, others gentle, but none could match his strength. One by one, they surrendered to him, and as they did, they transferred their divine energy into his body. The chamber glowed softly with each exchange, the water shimmering as if acknowledging his growing power. By the 9th night, he was no longer the man he had been. He was something greater. His body radiated a new energy, his touch capable of making any woman tremble. His eyes burned with an ancient fire. His skin carried the pulse of the ocean itself, cool yet electrifying. He had become a being of both land and water, a prince of the deep. The mermaids, satisfied beyond their wildest dreams, swam around him in giddy excitement. Never had a mortal man pleased them so completely. He's ready," one of them murmured, her body still weak from their night together. the bioluminescent markings along her arms flickering with contentment. Zara approached him, pride shining in her eyes. My love, you have done what no man before you has accomplished. You have tamed the waters, conquered the mermaids, and now you are mine. She gestured toward the grand palace gates, which swung open to reveal an underwater city filled with lights, music, and celebration. Coral towers stretched upward, their tips glowing like lanterns in the dark expanse. We shall prepare for our wedding. You will rule beside me forever. Idris's heart pounded. A wedding forever? Had he been tricked? The mermaids cheered, the mermaids cheered, their laughter ringing through the water like delicate chimes. The wedding of the century was about to take place, and Idris, now a prince of the deep, was bound to Zara in ways he had never imagined. As the celebration began, he realized his fate was no longer his own. The village of Iil Kururu was never the same after the night Idris disappeared into the Ogen River. Whispers spread like wildfire, tales of how he had been claimed by the river goddess Zara, the queen of the waters. For many he had become a legend, a man taken by the divine, lost to the mortal world forever. But Idris had not abandoned his people. As the newly crowned prince of the deep, his powers reached beyond the waters, stretching out to touch the land he had once called home. Each morning, as the villagers fetched water from the river, they found it sweeter, clearer, and more invigorating than ever before. The crops flourished, the fish multiplied, and the hunters returned with more game than they could carry. The blessings of Idris, now a god among men, poured over them like rain in the heart of the rainy season. Yet the greatest blessing was one that was spoken of only in hushed tones. The women of Iil Kururu, having tasted Idris's touch, found themselves forever changed. Ordinary men no longer satisfied them, their desires now ignited by a flame that only a god could quench. Husbands and lovers alike struggled to meet their newfound hunger, leaving the women longing for the one who had set their bodies aflame. Under the vast waters of the Ogen River, preparations for the grand wedding were underwater. The underwater palace shimmered with the light of thousands of glowing pearls, and schools of colorful fish danced in harmony to the rhythmic beats of enchanted drums. Mermaids, adorned in jewelry crafted from rare seashells, sang songs of joy and praise, their voices mingling with the currents in a melody that echoed through the deep. When the day finally arrived, it was said that even the heavens rejoiced. The river rose high, its waves cresting in jubilant splashes that reached the very edges of the village. The people of Iil Kururu, sensing the divine celebration below, gathered by the riverbank, their hearts swelling with awe and pride. In the heart of her palace, Zara stood radiant in a gown woven from the very fabric of the sea, shimmering with every movement. Her beauty was unparalleled, her form lush and curvaceous, the embodiment of feminine grace and power. Strings of pearls draped across her collarbone, catching the light like tiny moons. As Idris approached her, adorned in regal attire gifted by the river spirits, their eyes met, and in that gaze was a promise of eternity. Before the assembly of mermaids, spirits, and the ancient gods of the waters, Idris and Zara exchanged vows. Their union was not just of the flesh, but of power and purpose. The river roared in approval, its waters churning with the force of their bond. The night was filled with dance and merry, and as the spirits celebrated, Idris knew he had found a purpose beyond his mortal life. Each night, as the moonlight pierced the river's surface, Idris and Zara found solace in each other's arms. No longer constrained by the limits of the human body, he explored the depths of pleasure only the divine could offer. Zara, her jealousy quelled and her heart full, surrendered herself to his embrace. His strength was unmatched, his touch a potent blend of tenderness and power that left her breathless and yearning for more. That night, as the festivities continued, Idris took Zara into his arms once more. Their lovemaking was an elemental force, each touch and kiss sending waves through the water, each moan and cry causing the river to swell. Zara clung to him, her breath hitching, her body trembling as he brought her to heights she had never imagined. The faint glow of bioluminescent corals illuminated their entwined forms, casting soft dancing shadows across the chamber walls. "You have made me whole," she gasped, her fingers tracing the lines of his powerful body. "No goddess has ever known such pleasure, and no mortal has ever been so blessed," he replied, pulling her closer, the warmth of his breath mingling with the coolness of the water around them. Night after night, they indulged in their desires. Idris's strength seemed boundless, his passion a raging fire that even the depths of the ocean could not extinguish. The palace itself seemed to respond to their union, the shimmering pearls along the walls pulsing softly in rhythm with their hearts. Zara's beauty grew with each encounter, her body a masterpiece sculpted by their love. Her skin was smoother, her laughter richer, and her presence more commanding. She became a queen among queens, revered by all creatures of the deep. With every night they spent entwined, Zara grew younger and more beautiful. Her skin, already flawless, gleamed with a fresh radiance. Her curves became fuller, firmer, as if the touch of Idris was a potion of eternal youth. Her laughter rang like bells through the underwater halls. Her eyes sparkled with the light of 1,000 stars, and her very presence became a siren's call to all who dwelt in the depths. Meanwhile, the women of Iil Kururu, affected by Idris's divine essence, became insatiable. No mortal men could satisfy the hunger he had ignited. Their dreams were filled with visions of the man who had once roamed their village, his powerful frame and intoxicating presence haunting their restless nights. Yet they could only long for what they had lost, for Idris was no longer theirs to claim. The riverbanks, once quiet at dusk, now hummed with whispered prayers and longing sighs. Though he ruled beneath the waves, Idris's legacy lived on in the hearts and bodies of those he had left behind. The river became a sacred site where women whispered prayers for satisfaction and men sought blessings for strength. His name was invoked in songs and stories, the mortal who had ascended to the realms of gods through sheer will and unmatched desire. Children played along the banks, singing rhymes about the prince who conquered the river goddess and became one with the sea. Zara, in her contentment, ensured that her prince's power was felt far and wide. She sent waves of prosperity to his people, guided lost travelers to safety, and blessed the lands with bountiful harvests. The fishermen returned with overflowing nets, and the fields bloomed with vibrant crops. Her love for Idris grew deeper with each passing day, their passion as fierce as the first night they had united. In the end, Idris was no longer just a man from Iil Kururu. He was a legend, a deity of desire and strength, whose touch had forever changed both the mortal and immortal worlds. And as the river flowed on, carrying the whispers of his greatness, Zara lay beside him, her heart and body forever bound to the prince who had rocked her world and turned her into a goddess anew. The moonlight filtering through the water cast a silvery halo around them, a testament to the eternal love that now ruled both land and sea. The story of Idris and Zara teaches us a powerful lesson about desire and consequence. What may seem like boundless pleasure and power can come with unforeseen sacrifices, binding us to paths we never intended to walk. It reminds us to be mindful of what we chase, for every choice carries a price. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to explore more captivating stories and exciting videos right here. What would you do if someone offered to make you the most beautiful person in the world? But there was one condition. You could never look at your own reflection in the mirror, not even once. Would you take the risk? In a small village surrounded by lush green fields and flowing streams, there was a woman named Lami. The village was lively, with children playing under the sun and traders calling out their goods in the marketplace. Lami was not like the other women in the village. She was very kind and intelligent, known for her gentle heart and quiet nature. But there was one thing she wanted more than anything else. It was beauty. While other women were admired for their lovely faces and beautiful features, Lami felt overlooked. She dreamed of the day when people would stop, stare, and marvel at her beauty. She really desired to be beautiful so she could get the attention that everybody else was getting. Lami believed that their attention would change her life. As the years passed, her desire only grew. It consumed her, becoming an obsession she could not shake off. She spent hours standing by the village well, looking into the water's surface, wishing her reflection would change. But it never did. The same plain face stared back at her day after day. The other women noticed that she always spent a lot of time looking at her reflection. They whispered and rumored behind her back, and sometimes they laughed at her silent longing for beauty she did not have. Lami often heard rumors about a powerful old woman who lived deep in the forest beyond the village. They said the old woman could grant any wish, but at a price. People whispered about how the old woman had given riches to the poor and even brought dead people back to life. But there were always dark rumors that followed these stories, rumors of terrible consequences, strange disappearances, and worse. The villagers warned each other to stay away from the forest. Many who had gone seeking the woman's help never returned, or if they came back, they were changed forever. Still, the thought of this woman stirred something in Lami. If anyone could make her beautiful, it was the old woman. Lami watched as many beautiful women in the village got married, some younger than her. It bothered her that she could not get any man to notice her. She felt invisible, like she blended in with the air. When her young cousin got married, Lami was so sad about that. The wedding was grand, filled with music and laughter, and she stood among the guests, feeling lonelier than ever. I have to do something about this. I am tired of waiting and hoping that my kindness and my internal beauty will speak for me. I have to get up and do something before it's too late, she said to herself. Late one evening, while the sun went down and the village grew quiet, Lami made a decision. She could no longer bear the feeling of being invisible. Her desire for beauty was greater than her fear of the unknown. That night, She sneaked out of her home, leaving behind the safety of her village, and entered the dark forest. The forest was thick with towering trees and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air smelled of damp earth and old leaves. The deeper Lami walked, the more she felt the air around her grow cold. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she pressed on, her feet guiding her toward the heart of the forest where the old woman lived. As she kept walking into the forest, hours passed, and she began to doubt her decision. She had no idea where she was going, and the branches of the trees made it feel like the forest was closing in on her. The hoot of an owl startled her, and the distant sound of rustling made her skin crawl. Just when she thought about turning around, she saw it, a small dirty hut hidden between the roots of a big ancient tree. A faint light flickered from within, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Lami waited for a moment before approaching the door. With trembling hands, she knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing an old figure seated inside. The old woman's eyes glittered with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting Lami all along. The scent of strange herbs and burning incense filled the small room, making Lami feel light-headed. "Lami, so you have come for beauty," the old woman said, her voice low and deep. "You seek to be admired and adored by all who see you, don't you?" Lami nodded, too nervous to speak. The old woman laughed softly. "I can grant you this wish. I can make you the most beautiful woman the world has ever seen. But there is one condition." Lami leaned in, her heart racing. "You must never, ever look at your own reflection again. No mirrors, no water, no glass. If you do, the consequences will be severe." The warning sent a chill down Lami's spine, but her desire for beauty was too strong. She thought to herself, how hard can it be? I have lived without beauty for so long, so I can live without seeing myself in the mirror. I will do whatever it takes for me to be beautiful. The price is not that bad. Without a second thought, she agreed. The old woman's smile widened, her teeth yellowed and sharp. She made some concoction and gave Lami to drink. The potion was bitter, and Lami had to force herself to swallow it. Then the old woman waved her hand over Lami, and in an instant, a warm sensation spread through Lami's body. It felt as though she was being transformed from the inside out. Her skin tingled, her hair felt fuller, and she could feel the change before she even saw it. When Lami left the old woman's hut, she felt different. A warmth spread through her veins, an energy she had never felt before. When she returned to the village, the reaction was immediate. People stared as she passed by, their mouths open wide, their gazes filled with awe. People whispered with admiration, their voices hushed yet eager. People followed her everywhere, looking at how beautiful she was, their footsteps echoing her own. Lami's beauty was beyond anything the village had ever seen. Her once plain and ordinary features had transformed into something breathtaking. Her skin glowed like the sun at dawn. Her hair shimmered like silk caught in moonlight, and her eyes sparkled like the stars scattered across the midnight sky. Her body was curvier, sculpted, as if by the gods themselves, and her face was the most beautiful the village had ever known. At first, Lami was so happy. Every day people complimented her, admired her, and treated her like royalty. The attention she had once longed for was now hers. The girls who had once laughed at her now envied her with glances of both admiration and resentment. The boys who had never noticed her were now fighting for her attention, their once indifferent eyes now filled with longing. Men lined up outside her house to propose marriage to her, bringing gifts of woven fabrics, rare beads, and precious stones. Girls lined up outside her house to invite her to places, hoping to bask in her radiance. Lami's beauty had made her the most important person in the village, but with all the admiration came something unexpected.